Hi there, and welcome to the ShopNotes Podcast. This is episode 15. I'm your host, Phil Huber, and today I'm joined by the usual suspects, Logan Whitmer and John Doyle. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about how the three of us got started in woodworking and what our influences are. We'll also take a look around our workbenches to see what we're working on, and also give some updates about the podcast and the magazine and what we all have going on. So let's get started. This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Plans. You'll find nearly 1,000 plans covering everything that you'd want to build, from furniture projects to gift projects, kitchen accessories, workshop projects and jigs, and more. Find your next project at woodsmithplans.com.
Awkward silence.
Awkward silence. So one of the, we usually try and keep a list of podcast topics that we can talk about on a weekly basis. Of course, we want to talk about the projects that we're working on, but it's always nice to hear from the listeners. And we've had a couple of requests now to talk about our origin stories. So when you first got your superpower of woodworking, and maybe what propelled you along the way. Because I think we probably all have a first woodworking memory, but then there's also kind of the what's kept it up since then. So, John, you want to start it off?
Yeah, sure. Well, I always, as a kid, enjoyed building stuff, creating stuff, whether it was Legos or other building materials. And we had a garage shop at our house, and I followed my dad around on, his home improvement endeavors, and always had a hammer and nails and plane, much to my dad's detriment, I think, using his tools and leaving them out and getting them rusty and stuff. So I think that's kind of where it started. My grandpa was a big woodworker and tinkerer too. So that's kind of what started it out. And then as I grew up, I kind of, got into shop classes in high school and middle school, as most, people that have interest in it do. So it kind of followed through there. And then I went off to college and I majored in mechanical engineering. So still wanting to design and create stuff, but it still had that love of woodworking. I ended up minoring in forestry and forest products, and foster the creating out of wood type thing. So then I graduated with my mechanical engineering degree, decided I didn't want to sit at a desk and behind a computer. So I got a job out of college working for a custom cabinet shop. And I kind of got to do a little bit of everything there, whether it's design or working, out in the shop, building stuff, installing cabinets, kind of learn more about fine woodworking from that job. And I worked there for 3 years before I found a job at Woodsmith Magazine, and kind of continued there. So, and it's in that, after graduating from college too, I bought a house and I had a family. So then it started, doing more home improvement projects or building furniture for my house or my kids or that kind of thing. So that kind of fostered the hobby side of it as I, continued to grow in woodworking at Woodsmith Magazine. So that's kind of where I started out and where I am now, I guess.
So would you say that your woodworking, well, first of all, I want to say that just the fact that you majored in mechanical engineering and forest products makes you probably the most legitimate out of the three of us.
You know what? I went to school for engineering, and I got all the way through, got my degree, and I did not get to drive one train. So that's kind of where I was disappointed, and probably why I'm in woodworking rather than engineering. So, but yeah.
Right.
So if these are origin stories, every origin story has a villain, right? So who did your villain be during your early woodworking career, John?
Oh, during my early woodworking career, I don't know. Probably myself, because I was just such a curious kid and like breaking tools and breaking stuff and getting into stuff. So at that time, as a young child, it was probably myself. Now it's probably more kids and kids toys and activities and stuff that are my villain, because my garage filled up with bikes and toys and sandboxes,
scooters and
mini bike. I'm looking around the garage right now of all the stuff that's in here, and so that's the big thing is by all the noise around it. So
yeah, I mean, I love my kids, and I have it's fun spending time with them. But you knew this was coming. But it's one of those things where it's like you're working in the office for the magazine or something, and it's one of those days where it's just like a heavy computer day or meetings or something like that, and you get to about 3:30, and you're thinking, oh man, tonight it's kind of nice out, I'm going to spend some time out in my shop. And you're on your way home and you get the text or the call, and it's like, hey, do you remember that it's blah blah blah's concert or practice or fill in the blank? And then it's just like the bomber got shot down right over the target. So
yeah, that's kind of the good thing right now is with schools being closed and we're all home, is there's no basketball practice or cross country practice or concerts or running around, but the kids are still underfoot. But it's been kind of nice because they've been out here in the garage and doing some stuff with me or asking me hey Dad, will you build this real quick? Or I don't even know what day it is anymore. Maybe it was a week or two ago. I don't even know. But built a little guinea pig hut for my daughter's guinea pigs that the guinea pigs sleep in, and just kind of putting fun projects together for them like that. So
yeah. Logan, what about you?
It's funny because I think we've all heard this from each other in different stuff, through the TV show and stuff. It's kind of the same thing as John. I was always following my dad around, not necessarily doing woodworking projects. It was more of like, really anything he was doing. So whether it was, we used to finish a lot of basements for people. So it was framing and then drywalling and then pulling wire before drywalling. Well, I made that mistake once. But, it's like just doing random stuff like that with my hands. And same thing. I loved Legos. I loved building stuff.
Right.
I've always loved building stuff, and it doesn't matter if it's Legos. My favorite thing growing up was an erector set, and I had 4 or 5 of them. And I'm young enough that the ones I got when I was younger had the little motors on them that you could plug into the computer and program them and stuff. And it was just, it was blessed. I always loved building stuff. And once I got into middle school or high school, and I realized, hey, my high school has an entire woodworking shop and metal shop. I mean, I was in heaven. And it's like, wow, there's more to woodworking than building a basement. And I kind of just took off from there. And anybody that knows me knows if I do something, I'm fully invested right away. So it just was like 1,000 miles an hour from the get-go.
Right.
So
200%.
Exactly. My earliest thing, it's funny because nobody in my family was necessarily a woodworker. My great grandpa was. He did a lot of scroll saw work.
Okay.
So we do a lot of little yard art. The only thing I have of his tool wise, I did have some of his stuff. I have a set of his awls. Just kind of the generic cool. Sears and Roebuck,
but with the little fun bonnet on the top.
Yeah, I mean, I have a set of these. I have another one up here. So it's just, not any fine woodworking tools, and he didn't do what I would call fine woodworking. He did more of craft fair type woodworking. So signs and yard stuff. My aunt used to paint a lot of them. My great aunt. So they were always teaming up on stuff. I ended up with his scroll saw, and I quickly realized it wasn't a very good one, so I sold it and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of how I got started. I did woodworking all through high school. I spent more time than I should have in the shop in high school, probably. And during college, obviously being in college, I didn't have much room or time to invest in woodworking, so I kind of fell out of it. then moving back or moving to Des Moines, where we're at now, buying our first house, got a shop, got my garage, and one of the first projects really was to build a crib for my son. And I told my wife, I was like, hey, you know what? If you're going to buy a crib and spend a good amount of money on it, I was like, hey, just let me buy a table saw and I'll build it. And she did, and I think she's regretted that day ever since. So then it's all
right. The having kids or getting the tools?
The kids.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Although I will say, these last couple of weeks being home, right, on our quarantine, is interesting because really just within this 3-week period, I found that my kids are now at the age where my wife and I can both go do something without worrying about the kids a lot, which is really nice. I mean, our youngest is going to be 3 this summer. But he's always been one of those, it's like, gotta keep an eye on Henry because who knows what he's doing.
Or where he is.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of the little cannonball. Like if he can go through it, he's going to try. And he's at the point where my wife will be in the office working or sewing or doing whatever. I could be in my shop for an hour and I won't hear a peep out of the kids. I'll go upstairs and they're both playing or watching TV or something. And my oldest will say, hey, I got him a snack. And it's like, this is great.
Yeah, that's a fun milestone when you realize where it's like, my full-time job is not overseeing your entertainment right now.
Exactly. So, so it's been fun. So I've gotten a lot of work done here in the shop in the last couple of weeks. So
sweet.
Yeah, if they're anything like my kids, it's like if you can hear like a steady amount of noise and activity, everything's fine. It's when it goes silent, it's like, okay, what's going on?
Whoa,
like it's too
we've
quiet.
reached DEFCON 1.
They're plotting something.
So. I will say, our youngest has learned that he can open the sliding glass door. So our cat has made out onto the deck 5 times in this last week. He's not an outside cat either. He made the mistake of jumping off the deck once, and he won't do that again, I don't think.
Right. Well, hot stove teaches best.
Yep, exactly. What about you, Phil?
Well, first I was going to ask John, because both of you, like the 3 of us, are in that time frame where a lot of schools dropped shop classes or radically changed them away from shop classes. Now, I gather from yours, Logan, that having your shop class was pretty formative in becoming a woodworker. And you mentioned it, John. Would you say that your shop class actually helped you, kept that in you as a...
Yeah, I would say so, just because a lot of times you don't have access to the space or the array of tools that a shop class would have. You don't necessarily have that at home growing up. So I think that's kind of a big thing as far as stoking the fire of being able to do more things and progressing in woodworking or building stuff or any kind of, creative endeavor, is having the tools and the space and that learning opportunity. So I would say, I've definitely shop class has had a big part in that.
Sure. See, because when I was we called it junior high back then, I had shop class for 12 weeks in 7th and 8th grade. And I would say that those 2 classes were a lot of fun for me. But by the time I got to high school, it was, and I totally get the idea that this is my own miscalculation, but I kind of regret taking woodworking classes in high school, thinking that, either my dad would be able to teach me, or I kind of fell victim to the guidance counselors who were like, you don't take those if you're in the college track,
Yeah, sure.
So there was kind of a tiered classification of these kind of students take shop classes and these kind of students don't take shop classes. So if going back in time, I would slap my high school self to take those classes, because I think my own woodworking would have gotten just that much better sooner. And I think probably would have carried me a little bit more, because I got to high school and I didn't really do a ton of shop or woodworking, even with my dad. I did some like you guys have mentioned, home improvement stuff or car repair, that kind of thing. But then, through high school and college, I was either wrapped up in that or living in a dorm. You're not really doing a ton of woodworking. And so it was really after I got out of college and had my own apartment where I started to put that back together. And I think what really triggered it for me to get back into woodworking or to dive into it a little more was having woodworking magazines around at the time, which was, early internet days. So there wasn't much out there that way. But, like my dad was a subscriber to Woodsmith and ShopNotes. And every time I would see him or go up to visit, he would, I'd always flip through his magazines, and it was kind of vicarious woodworking. And it was more of the idea of like, this would be really fun to build. And then I would read the article or read about the tool or the technique. And then I started to pick up some more tools and things along the way. And I think that's what really made the big difference. So, I mean, even now I have a ton of woodworking magazines where I have little Post-its and dog-eared corners. And, I keep way more magazines than I should, just because there's a lot of fun projects that if I were to win the lottery or something, I would just basically not come out of my shop and just build stuff nonstop. So,
it's funny because I think we would all agree that shop classes have diminished over the years, right?
Right.
That not a lot of schools have shop classes anymore. But what I found is those that do have shop classes, the quality of them has improved significantly. At least the ones I'm aware of.
Right.
Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking, I think there was like a lull in the 80s and early 90s where there was a big push for technology. Like all the shop classes changed from industrial arts or shop to technology education. So like in our high school, one of the wood shops just got totally ripped out and turned into the computer lab, where they were doing programming and things like that. And which is fine. I mean, that needs to be part of an education too, I think. But I think there's a both and instead of an either or. But you're right. It seems like even where I live now, the school is pretty heavily focused on academics, but still has a decent wood shop program going.
Yeah. The one I'm thinking of, I just took some stuff up to them because I know one of their teachers was my shop teacher in high school. And they've seemed, my shop class in high school was most people were building the wall shelf or the small shop class stuff. But what it seems to be that a lot of these schools are going to is more of the STEM-based stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it incorporates some form of shop, some form of woodworking or metalworking or something, but it's more from an industrial standpoint. So, Spencer, Iowa, where I went up and brought some stuff up to them. They have a really cool, I don't want to call it an engineering program, but kind of. They have a lot of CNC stuff. They have Inventor, and all their students are learning Inventor, which is super cool. So it's more focused, I guess, towards preparing students for entering the industrial field right out of high school and or setting them up well for college to continue on that path and not necessarily having a personal shop like we have. But it's interesting just to see the shift in it because it's went more from, practical hands-on use to more of setting them up for a career, which I don't think is bad. But just, it's an interesting shift.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've seen too. Is like we went through a period of society where the trades were kind of looked down upon. It's like, no, you should go to college. You shouldn't get into the trades. And then it seems like all that shop class stuff, fell off there for a while. And now people are realizing that, there are a lot of, people going into the trades and they need people there. And even if you don't plan on, getting into hands-on, trade type work, it's like that stuff's still really handy to have in, everyday life of being able to, either take care of your home or your car or that kind of thing. So it's good to, no matter what you plan on going into, is some sort of background in that. So
cool. Well, I would agree. I mean, it's just like you got the like micro kind of dirty jobs, idea of, recognizing the value of the people who work in those kind of jobs in skilled trades, and also that it's not the unskilled look to it. I mean, if you're going to go into it, there's a lot of technology that's flowing into it in terms, like you mentioned, Logan, in terms of CNC machines or CAD drawing skills, even just basic and not so basic business information of being able to know how to run to bill your time, to cost out jobs and things like that. That's
having a higher level look at it.
Right. Yeah. So there you go. Superman origin stories for woodworkers. So do you guys remember? So I remember my two shop teachers. One was a guy, 7th grade. His name was Mr. Will. And he had the like old school shop glasses that he wore all the time. I think they were prescription with the little screens on the side, that flipped out. And he was a safety stickler, let's just say. Which I get, when you're working with,
a
bunch of young kids or whatever. But I think I enjoyed working in spite of my class with Mr. Will.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, ours were we had Mr. Allman, who recently retired from where I went to high school, which was unfortunate because probably one of the best guys I've ever met, one of the best people I've ever met. And Clint Gator, one of my other shop teachers, he's up in Spencer, Iowa now teaching, both great guys. So definitely two of the biggest influences, I guess, from my early life, which was fun. So that's fun to be in touch with them still.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah, I had Mr. Plants was my high school shop teacher and football coach. And it's weird to think back now because he was probably my age now, and like I'm still in my 20s. So I mean, he must have been really young shop teacher. So it's weird to think about.
Yep.
But it's funny. I was thinking back. He was my football coach, and I often joke around with you guys about rage work or whatever. It's like when I get mad, I do a lot of work. He was probably the first one to get that out of me. Is like when he wanted me to stop screwing around on the football field, he would do something to make me really mad, and then it's like, look out, this guy's about ready to do some rage work. So he is the origin story of the Hulk woodworker, I guess, if we're talking superhero origin stories. So
there you go.
That's where it all began.
Nice.
Did I ever tell you guys I lit my pants on fire in high school shop?
Liar, liar.
I did. Fire. So we had a big metal shop as well. So it was like half metal, half woodworking. And I almost enjoyed metal shop more than wood shop, just because I knew a lot about the wood shop. So it was learning something from metalworking. Oh yeah, I was using oxyacetylene to cut some steel plate apart. And back then in high school, it was really cool to have frayed pant legs, except when you're cutting steel plate with an oxyacetylene torch. All of a sudden, I'm like, why are you guys beating on my legs? What are you doing? And my pants were on fire.
I know you're 10 years younger than me, but I'm imagining that you were wearing like Hammer pants, like MC Hammer pants.
No. No. They were like Jinko jeans. Remember Jinkos?
No, I don't.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, John does it.
They were all baggy with all the big pockets. Yep.
Okay.
Not a proud point in my life.
Yeah.
All right. So what are you guys working on?
John?
Right now I'm working on the 50 bowls in 50 weeks. So I have my bowl blank.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have a lathe at home, so I was going to do the router and bowl and tray method. So I got my template and my blank. So
Nice.
that's kind of what I'm messing around with in my shop right now. So we'll see how long it takes me to do that. Probably at least 3 or 4 weeks.
All right, I got a few bowls on bank. I think this will be the next one. This one's one that I was texturing.
Oh, yeah.
So it turned out pretty cool, I think. I'm gonna maybe colorize it. But I'm working on, I don't know if you can see back there, I have some poker table legs. That's the short section. The big section is leaning across my bench back there.
Oh, there we go.
Yep. For those of you guys that are watching, working on that. It's going a little bit slower doing it all at home than it is in the shop where we have access to all our big tools.
Right.
But yeah, working on that. I'm also starting to cut parts apart for a little miter plane I'm gonna make. So
nice.
So we got some bridge, and some base, and a piece of brass for the back. And I'm still sorting through hand tools. Like I almost got through all of mine, and then I bought some more, which was like
restock.
Yeah, you got to restock. Yeah. And so I came up with these were in I bought a box of knobs and totes from hand planes, right? Just like random ones, and there was like 2 or 3 in there that I thought were kind of interesting, and they ended up being like number 45 Stanley knobs from the fence. So I made my money back on those, and I got a few others to sell now. But this was in there. I don't know if you guys could see that. My lighting's not terribly good over here. It's like it's just a little like threaded knob. It's like a little brass threaded knob, but it's nickel plated, super heavy, and it's small. And it looks like it should go like on like a depth stop of like a Stanley 78, like dado plane or rabbit plane or something.
Plane, yeah.
But it doesn't, and it doesn't fit. And I can't figure, I have 2 of them and I can't figure out what it is. The only thing I can think of is maybe it's like an antique drawer pull, maybe.
That seems like a pretty big hole on the inside for a drawer pull.
Well, it's about a quarter 20. A quarter 20 doesn't fit it, but it's about the size of it.
Yeah.
So I keep reaching out to the Facebook groups I'm part of and the hand plane restoring groups. I'm like, what is this? This has to be like it looks so familiar.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of people that are like, yeah, I've seen that 1,000 times, but I couldn't tell you what it is. And I know it's gonna be something stupid, like it's gonna be like the top of a faucet or something silly like that.
Yeah.
But it's like, what the heck? Come on. So yeah. That's what I'm working on.
Okay.
You working on, Phil?
Well, I'm still working on my nightstand project, and I'm depending on how the weather holds up here. Hopefully, we'll be able to get to the point where I can assemble it. It's one of those things where every time I get a little closer to assembly, my excitement level goes way up, and then I realize, oh, there's probably like 4 or 5 more steps yet before I should really assemble this. You know, like I have a pretty small drawer compartment and then a little shelf just below the top that will, you can tuck like a book or 2 underneath it or something like that. And I was thinking, probably should pre-finish that before gluing it up. So it's like, dang it, now I got to do that. And so, but in the whole process of making this thing, I realized how much I miss my router table. I think we talked about this last week.
Yeah.
So what I have found and rediscovered was how much I love the edge guide that came with my little Bosch router.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it turns your handheld router into a router table because you get a fence that's built into it and everything's kind of pre-programmed. So it's just a matter of bringing a new piece in and I can make a bunch of repetitive cuts without having to clamp and unclamp straight edges and things like that. So,
well, you know what Mr. Fitch would do? He would just clamp that in his bench and use it as a router table.
Right, which I'm going to admit that I did.
All right.
A couple of the pieces, and it worked surprisingly well, even though it was definitely hacked.
Yeah.
So, but one thing that I've noticed is that these edge guides, especially the generic ones that kind of come with your stock router, the fences on them are pretty short. So whenever you start and end a cut, you get to that hair raising point where it's like jiggle, and then it just kind of shifts, and you get a wobble in your cut, whatever it is, rabbit or a dado or something.
Yeah.
So what I did is I got had some Wenge pieces that I just didn't know what to do with, and it's Wenge, so I didn't really want to throw it out or put it in the burn pile. So I sliced it down to about a 1/2 inch thick, put some chamfers on it. Now I have a pretty long, it's about 12 inches long now. For those of you who are listening on YouTube, you can see, put a fence on there, and that made a huge difference in terms of being able to register the router, both as you're starting and exiting a cut. So.
Yeah, I was going to grab my router. It's actually up in the garage. I showed you guys a picture. I finished my screen door I started like a month or like a year ago.
Right.
But my router's in the garage still from routing the groove for the spline. But I have one of those, I got it from one of our work things. It's like the CB2.
The CRB7.
CRB7, yes. It's like the big Optimus Prime of the router bases. Same thing. I've been using it with it comes with adjustable fences for doing like mortises, and I just yanked one of them off, and it's just a big, huge fence on it now. Yeah, it's big edge guide, which is great, and it works phenomenally.
So that's kind of what I've been working on.
Are you going to build another router table then?
I am. Yeah, I'm probably going to build 2. I have parts because we did this one on the TV show.
Yep.
And I have some parts left over from when we, the stunt parts, so to speak, from when we did that episode that I can fill out the rest of that one. So
yeah,
I'm going to have that one for my little Bosch router, that handheld, that a little Colt. And then I still want to make probably a benchtop one, but a little beefier in size for my 690, just to have something that has a little bit more muscle behind it.
Yeah. We were working on a SIB, a special interest book, our router table book. It's a reprint actually. But no, I don't know if you remember the old Woodsmith one that was a stackable. It's like you take the top off, and I like that thing is super cool. Like,
that
how
one
have I
is
never
pretty cool,
built that one? So
I actually had a version of that one in my first home shop in our first house that my brother had started, and then when he was moving, didn't have room for it, so I got it and finished it off. And so that one is a pretty sweet design.
Nice. All right.
Well, I think that wraps up today's episode of the ShopNotes Podcast. We'd like to hear your questions, comments, and smart remarks. You can direct those to us at the email address woodsmith@woodsmith.com. Also, something new that we're incorporating with our podcast broadcast are show notes pages for each episode. You can find that at woodsmith.com. Thanks for listening to the ShopNotes Podcast, and we'll see you again next week. Bye.
This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is brought to you by Woodsmith Magazine. Woodsmith Magazine has been the trusted source for all of your woodworking information for over 40 years. From tips and techniques to furniture projects to shop projects, you'll find it all in Woodsmith Magazine. Subscribe today at woodsmith.com.